Here we are. We're going live and we're live. Yes, we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome, 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 welcome. As always, I want to give a couple minutes for everyone to make their way into the chat. Sorry, I look like a hot mess today. It's Saturday, and I have been on the go pretty much all day, pretty much. Anyway, but as you're coming in, say hello in the chat. Let me know if you're here for the first time. Also would love to know where you're watching from today. I'm going to turn my watch off because that's making a lot of noise. Yeah, but I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes to find their way into the chat. Let me know if you're here for the first time. Say hello in the chat, and then let me know where you're watching from. Sorry, just answering a text from Sweet Bear. And then we'll get this thing started. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hi, everyone. Let's give some shout outs to a few people who are here. If you want to get a shout out, you got to say hello in the chat. Let's see. Sky is here from Texas. Beatriz is here. Leanne is here. Julio, Cameron, Isaiah, Christy Kins McQueen. Simon is here from Arizona. Deborah Perry, Julio, Jay Kiter, welcome back. Smiling Christy is here. Nathan Ramsey, good to see you, my friend. I'm doing quite well today. Hopefully you all are doing well as well. Rachel is here. Lillian James, welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Dayton. Welcome to Igor. Welcome to everyone who is here today. I hope you all are having a fantastic Saturday or Saturday night, depending on sort of where you are watching from. I hope today has been awesome for you. Welcome everybody to Q&J Today. This is the show where I answer your questions. So as we're getting started, start throwing questions over in the chat. I'm going to be on here for the next 15 to 20 minutes, and we can just do a little Q&A or Q&J because my name is John. These can be questions about anything. These can be questions about the Bible. These can be questions about God and your relationship with God, or these can be like funny would you rathers, or what's your favorite this, or what's your favorite that, or whatever. It literally, you can ask anything, whatever is going to be of value to you today. Those are the questions that I want to respond to. So start throwing those questions over in the chat. I'm going to start pulling them in just a minute. But before we get started, I wanted to let you all know, as I do every show, that this show is brought to you by the Super Chat. The Super Chat is a really great feature that allows you to highlight your question in the chat, guarantee that your question will get answered, but also every dollar given in the Super Chat goes directly towards this channel, goes directly towards this ministry, really. It helps me to continue to do things like this, put out videos on this channel, but also doing things like the John Cast and the Bear and the Swan. This is part of my full-time job, and so the way that I'm able to do that and not have to get other jobs is because of the generosity of people just like you on things like Patreon, but also in the Super Chat. So if you're in a place where you're able to give just $1, $2, $5 in the Super Chat, it makes a huge difference. As always, it's located just under where you type something into the chat. There's a little money symbol. All you do is you click on that, you fill out a few things. And again, just giving $2, it really, really means so much. So if you're able to give in the Super Chat today, I would very much appreciate it. Now that that's out of the way, let's do this, people. Let's get down to business. To defeat the Huns, let's answer some questions. What questions do we have today? Jordan Jones asks, have you seen Endgame yet? Yes, I have seen Endgame. I'm not going to do any spoilers here. Don't worry. But if you haven't seen it yet and you're worried about spoilers, I don't know what you're doing. Like, go to the theater and see it. Sweet Bear and I, we are not big Marvel people necessarily. I know that's surprising because I love movies and whatnot. Just sort of gave up on the whole MCU a while ago, but my good friend Chris, he very much inspired me to at least see Infinity War and Endgame, so we watched both of those basically in the same day. Yeah, and we enjoyed the movie. It was fun. It was entertaining. Let's see. Helen P. asks, any book/music/podcast recommendations? That all depends on what kind of books, movies, music, and podcasts you like. I'm not the best music person, mostly because I rarely listen to music. I mostly listen to books, or I listen to podcasts or things like that. That's just what I prefer. Let's see. But a good book that I just read recently is a book called The Skeptical Believer by Daniel Taylor. It's a series of essays all around skepticism and doubt and Christianity. So if you're not into like reading the whole book, you can just like for me, I read like a couple essays a night for a while, and it was a really, really great book. Once again, that's The Skeptical Believer by Daniel Taylor. That's a good book. Podcast wise, you should subscribe to the John Cast and the Bear and the Swan. Absolutely, obviously. But beyond that, what have I been listening to? Oh, I've really been into the Bible Project podcast lately. Tim Mackey and John Collins do a fantastic job with that podcast. They have amazing conversations. If you're a Bible nerd like me, I highly, highly, highly recommend the Bible Project podcast. It's pretty much anywhere you can find your podcasts. Shane or Sean or Shaun. Gregory, thank you so much for the super chat. I so appreciate it. Trying to ask, what kind of books do you read for spiritual growth other than the Word of God? This is a great question. So I'm like a sporadic reader. I used to call myself a reader, but that's really not true. I go through seasons where I get really into reading. I read super heavily. And then there's other times where I am just telling myself that I need to read more. But for me, like I said, that book by Daniel Taylor, The Skeptical Believer, that's a book that has definitely encouraged me on my journey of spiritual growth in the realm of doubt. I don't know. I don't read a lot of Christian life books, as it were. I read a lot more books that are a bit more academic, I suppose. Yeah, there's a book that I'm reading right now called The Great Spiritual Migration by a guy named Brian McLaren. And basically it's a book about this current state of the church, and his whole hypothesis is that all throughout the church and all throughout Christianity, faith and the church and the way it's expressed has been migrating. It's been moving. It's been changing. Not that its core message has been changing, but the way that it practices and the way that it interacts with the world has changed in order to love and serve and hopefully minister to the culture that the church exists in. And what this book is sort of calling for is a new change within the modern day church, and the way that the modern day believers in churches sort of look at and practice faith. It's a really interesting book. I love reading books from people that I don't necessarily perfectly align with in terms of my exact beliefs or exact theology. And Brian McLaren definitely falls into that category. But it is really interesting to read people's different thoughts and different viewpoints. But like I said, I'm more on the academic side. I've read, the books by like Bob Goff and some of those books written by some of the very famous pastors, like some of Stephen Furtick's books and things like that. I've read those. I enjoy those, but I definitely take a much more academic approach. I'm reading a good book by Tim Keller right now on work. It's called Every Good Endeavor. I'm really enjoying that one. So those are some of the books that I am engaging with currently. Araminta Williams, thank you so much. $5 in the super chat. I so appreciate you. Thank you for your constant support, Araminta. You're the best. Araminta asks, with everything that's happening with the abortion laws, how do we respond when it comes to being approached by the question? Also, what's your email? So I'll throw my email in the chat for you, Araminta, right here. It's johnjorgensen3@gmail.com. So this is a great question. Obviously, the topic of abortion is a hot button issue, not just now, but has been in our culture and in our world for as long as abortion has been a thing. Even before there were medical procedures, I'm sure it was a hot button issue. Because really what we're talking about is we're talking about a woman's body and a woman's what a woman feels is her right to do with her body as she pleases. And then also on the other side of it, we're talking about human life. We're talking about the life of a human, or the depending on how you look at it, the potential life of a human. And so obviously these are going to be very, very personal and very, very hot button issues for anyone who's going to engage in them. But I think what I think is really important is for each and every one of us to try our best to remove the stigma around these issues and to remove this idea that the conversation surrounding abortion is a binary issue. I think that is a really, really destructive way to look at anything in the world, but especially something like abortion. That if I am pro-life and you are pro-choice, then guess what? You are other. You are opposite of me. You are my enemy. You are working for something that is ungodly and wrong, and I hate you therefore. And vice versa. I think that is an incredibly destructive way to look at it. And obviously that comes from the more conservative side of things, the pro-life side of things. That comes from hopefully a deep desire and a deep value of human life, obviously. But what we cannot do, especially as, I'm sure there's many Christians here watching who are pro-life. What we cannot do is allow ourselves to draw lines in the sand when it comes to those conversations, because then it just becomes a us versus them versus we sort of conversation. And I don't think that's helpful at all. I don't think that sort of versus mentality is helpful. But I think if we all could perhaps remove the stigma and try and step outside of our emotions for a second, and instead, when it comes to topics like abortion, seek to have honest, open, vulnerable, curious conversations with people, even people who have an opposing or different viewpoint than we do, and seek to understand why they think or why they believe the way they do. I think that could be incredible. I think that could be so amazing, because really, I think what we would learn is that if you are pro-choice, you might begin to learn that someone who's pro-life actually has many of the same values that you do, actually thinks about this topic of abortion in a pretty similar way that you do. They just label themselves in a different way. And so, yeah, that's me talking for a long time. But yes, absolutely. Those are sort of my thoughts. Daily We Do, my good friends. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your generosity. You guys are awesome. If you guys don't follow Daily We Do, if you haven't checked out their channel, I have. They're wonderful, faithful supporters of this channel, and they have a great channel themselves. I haven't watched any of your guys' videos in a while, but the ones that I have seen, I do very much enjoy. I really, really appreciate your support as always. Thank you guys. Love you. Love you. Julio asks, if you were stuck on an island, who will you have by your side? Hopefully Sweet Bear. Hopefully Sweet Bear would be there with me. Although, no, actually, I wouldn't wish that on her, because I'd want her to be safe somewhere and not stuck on an island. So then, other than that, I would probably choose then somebody who had the skills necessary to get us off of that island. That's what I would say. Let's see. What other questions do we have? Beatriz Ruiz asks one of the most popular questions in the world. Why do bad things happen to good people? This is a very, very popular question, and I want to say before I even begin responding to it, this is not a question that I have an answer to. This is not a question that I think any human has an answer to, and if any human tries to tell you that they do have the answer to this question, I would be pretty suspect of that person. But I have been doing a lot of listening and study recently on the wisdom literature in the Bible. That's talking specifically about the books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. And the book of Job specifically deals a lot, obviously, with the subject of human suffering. And specifically the way that God rules the world, and the way that God orients the world, and the way that God administers justice and good. And what God allows to happen versus doesn't allow to happen. In the book of Job, the story of Job's life is very much about that idea. And it is, we have this human, Job, who eventually gets to the point where he is caught up thinking that he knows how to run things, that if he's good, then this is the way it should be. That's how the book of Proverbs often puts it. The book of Proverbs is very formulaic in that it's a formulaic way of looking at the world, that if you do A, B, and C, you will get D. Then the book of Ecclesiastes is a little bit more murky. It's a little bit more like, hey, if you do A, B, and C, it would make sense that you get D, but sometimes for unforeseen reasons, you actually don't get D. You get something else. Life doesn't always work the way that we think, or the way that we want, or the way that makes sense to us. And if you've lived more than 5 minutes, you know that that's true. You know that there are times where, like we're talking about, bad things happen to a good person. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem just to our human minds. And the writer of Ecclesiastes is saying, yeah, that's true. That happens. And therefore, life is quote unquote meaningless outside of a relationship with God, who does know why these things happen, who does know why the world is run and orchestrated this way. And that's eventually the conclusion that Job comes to as well, is that, gosh, if I were to try to run the universe for even 2 seconds, I would screw everything up. But God is in control. And if I truly do believe that, then I am going to be willing, I need to be willing to accept the good along with the bad, and ultimately trust that God is in control. Not that I need to answer the question, why do bad things happen to good people, but instead choose to trust that God is in control of the universe. God is truly on the throne, and he knows what he's doing. So that's what I would say. Dayton asks, is there a certain way you find questions on here? Do you just look for random ones, or do you find a really good one? So for me, it's sort of a mix. I look through the chat, and sometimes I read a question. I'm like, you know what? I'm not really sure how to respond to that. Or I feel like I just talked about that. Or ooh, I just did a really serious question. Maybe we do like a more fun, goofy one right now. So yeah, there's a bunch of different sort of ways and factors that I think about it. I think ultimately what I would love to do is maybe have somebody sort of sitting off to the side who is just pulling questions for me and hitting me with questions. So then I don't have to spend all of this time like looking on the side and trying to find a good question. But yeah, I guess that's kind of how I choose it, I suppose. But unfortunately, that's all the time I'm going to spend answering questions today. I do want to ask you all a favor, though, before I go. You all, the 40 of you or so who are watching right now, I so appreciate you all. This audience for Q&J, it's a small audience, but it's a truly dedicated audience. And it's an audience that, like so many of you watch every single time that I go live here. And I'm so grateful for that. I want to ask a favor of you real quick. Hopefully you all are subscribed to the Johncast. That's my podcast, my sermon podcast, where I put up different teachings that I have done or am doing sort of all around the country. And we're in this series right now called Forward. I want to hear in the chat, have you been listening to Forward? Are you subscribed to the Johncast? Have you been listening to Forward? Put that in the chat right now if you are. Would love to know. And if you're not, please do. That would be awesome. But Gooby Hooby says, now I am. Dayton says some. Michaela says, I've loved the series. Yeah, so for those of you who have been following this series Forward, what we're actually going to be doing next week, we have our final installment, our 5th and final installment of the series. And then what I want to do the week after that is I want to do a Q&A episode all surrounding this 5-part Forward series. And I want to do it by answering questions from the listeners, from people like you. But I need you all to send in some questions. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to grab your phone, and I want you to download the Anchor app. The Anchor app looks like this. That's Anchor. Anchor spelled just like normal. That's Anchor right there. And what you can do is you basically just go to the Discover page. You search the Johncast. So you download the Anchor app. You search the Johncast. Then you go to the page, and right at the top, there's a little button here that says voice message. You click on that, and then you can record a question. So I would really, really appreciate if I could get some questions from you all. So once again, download the Anchor app, search the Johncast, click voice message, and ask a question about this forward series, not just any sort of question, but if you've been listening to the Johncast, specifically this forward series, talking about these obstacles that we run into and how we move forward in faith, I would so appreciate if a couple of you would hop on and maybe ask a few questions for me to respond to in an episode that's going to come out in about 2 weeks. I'm expecting to get some notifications on my phone here in the next 10 minutes or so from all of you. I would really, really appreciate it. But already, I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for giving in the super chat. Thank you for asking questions. I hope you all have an amazing weekend. Hope you have a relaxing Saturday night. And yeah, I'll see you all soon. I love you all. Keep being awesome.